Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, here we are. It's Labor Day, Monday. And that's something that we've all experienced throughout our lives, but do we really understand the history behind this alleged holiday? We here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have oftentimes reiterated on previous episodes that history is perhaps one of the greatest teachers possessed in all of humanity. And it's an arsenal that prepares us to fully understand the world around us and to allow us to have the tools necessary to propel ourselves back to the path of prosperity in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. So with respect to Labor Day, I know it may seem strange that I'm harping on this socialistic aspect of it, this Marxist aspect of it that is just dripping with irony, but it's time that we do kind of delve into that and explain exactly what it is and why it may not be that all-American holiday that we've come to think of it as. So what is the history of Labor Day? Well, let's look at an article that came out of stream.org. This article was written by Matt Barber, and it's entitled Labor Day, Burgers, Brats, and Socialism? And basically what Barber is trying to say here is that Labor Day does have its roots in socialism. In fact, the little subtitle of this article is, "The holiday is a socialist creation, but labor isn't. Christianity and capitalism do it much better." And you know, that's an interesting approach to take, particularly when you consider the current state of affairs that is unfurling here in these United States of America. We see that the traditional underpinnings of our society that go back to the inception of this nation some 235 plus years ago has come under a deliberate, meticulous, relentless, and unyielding attack, particularly by those that have infested and infiltrated our institutions of education and academia from coast to coast and border to border. So what is it exactly with this Labor Day holiday that has its roots all the way back in socialism? We see that it's not even that old of a holiday either, but Labor Day is not just about celebrating the value of hard work. It never was. At least it wasn't intended to be that. And you see, one of the things that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists have been so articulate with, so successful with, is attempting to couch what their true initiatives, goals, agendas, and dark and twisted machinations are. Remember that Zygmunt Dobbs, in his magnus opus of Keynes at Harvard, all the way back in the 1950s and 60s, warned that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists were all about incrementally perverting and thereby unraveling American society, which makes sense when you stop and think about it in an objective fashion. What socialists want to do is completely dismantle the preceding system of polity, but also culture. And that goes back to the Frankfurt School in the immediate wake of the First World War, where they determined that the way to really start spreading Marxism and to advance and progress their agenda was to stop just looking at it in the traditional Marxist dialectic of economy and class, and to go to the fundamental pillars of society. This is where we get the term cultural Marxism, and it has certainly been one of those pillars and terms that has come up time and time again all throughout the two disastrous terms of the Barack Hussein Obama regime. And there's a reason for this. It's because what they are ultimately trying to do is weaken the societal fabric of this once thriving and flourishing representative Republican vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours, because deep down they loathe and despise everything that the United States of America and her people stand for and represent. That is one of those things that is just difficult to comprehend sometimes. Why would anyone ever be against what the United States of America stands for? Why would they seek to destroy the longest contiguous or uninterrupted running constitutionally endowed federalist representative republic in the entire course of human events? Well, it's because they realize that their twisted machinations could never openly compete in a free marketplace of ideas, and therefore they must do everything they can to coerce rather, and to use the system of duress to try and force an unwilling people to accept their dark and twisted machinations, which are wholly unacceptable in an open, honest, but above all free society like that of the United States of America. But I think to fully understand this, we need to look at the way that Labor Day as a holiday is rooted in socialism. According to Barber, the history of Labor Day stretches back to at least 1882. And he said a couple of socialists, one named Matthew McGuire and the other Peter McGuire, were members of the Socialist Labor Party, and they proposed an official workers' holiday in New York to be called Labor Day. Now, historians have shown differences of opinions over which man proved to be principally responsible. However, this duet of socialists did have success. And on September 5th of 1882, when the United States was just reeling from populism that was starting to rise up. Remember that the election of 1896 was dominated by questions of currency, and at that time it was backed by gold, but there was a push for bimetallism. Remember, William Jennings Bryan had gone out and had essentially served as a dark horse candidate for the Democrat Party and was pushing for bimetallism by this point already. But it was in 1882, just before that election, that Labor Day first came about. And yes, it was propagated and advocated for by these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists. They wanted a labor type mentality to set in the United States in order to once again embrace this dark, twisted, maniacal line of thought, that of class warfare. And we see that the Democrat Party today, in 2016, has still embraced that, is still pushing for that, is advocating for that type of dark and twisted shell game to become a new norm in the United States of America. But it's rooted in the latter part of the 19th century. And so they pushed for it. By 1894, it had become declared a national holiday. That's how fast these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists were working at the time. And again, it reflects that populist mentality that had taken control in the body politique of the United States of America in the latter part of the 19th century. There was a lot of discontentment that was just swelling in the society at that time. Keep in mind that this was just barely after the Civil War, while 30 years or almost 30 years had passed since the end or cessation of hostilities. The scars and wounds of it were still very deep. It had only been 10 years since the end of Reconstruction, so there were still deep fissures and divisions and scars and wounds that were ailing and afflicting the societal fabric of the United States of America. So it was in that mindset and in those dark and turbulent times that Labor Day was allowed to come to fruition and became a thing. And so it's very much related also to another Labor Day type holiday. It's the one that's on May 1st, May Day. That was one of the quintessential holidays of the USSR, or the Soviet Union, and it's still a Labor Day for socialists all throughout the world, but we here in the United States have it in September. And there's a lot to be said for that too, because I think that there was a deliberate effort to try and use that to undermine another holiday that is not well thought of, not taught much anymore, but one that should be a quintessential aspect of the true heritage, character, spirit, but above all, identity of the United States of America, both as a nation and as a people. And of course, that is Constitution Day. And Constitution Day is really a day that we should celebrate, both as a nation and as a people. As far as I'm concerned, it's just as important of a holiday as that of Independence Day, because it was through the Constitution that we developed our national identity, and we put out the proper scope and application of a limited, constitutionally endowed, federalist representative republic, which has become a hallmark of freedom and liberty and the natural law tenets that are just the quintessential aspect of who we are. And it's important that we focus on that because it has been besmirched and belittled by these deliberate and incessant efforts by the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists who are hell-bent on the complete and utter annihilation of the United States of America, both as a nation and as a people. It's not something that can be sugar-coated or candy-coated, and it certainly can't be swept under the rug. But when was the last time you heard the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media mention Constitution Day? I haven't recalled them mentioning it for years. In fact, I don't ever remember them mentioning it. It's just something that I was able to discover in my own diligent efforts of researching American history, culture, and society. And I believe that's one of the travesties that faces us. I think that's part of the reason why you are finding so many in America disenfranchised. It's because they don't fully realize what their history is. And that is done on purpose. It's been done deliberately in the hopes of dividing and conquering the American people. We've oftentimes reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists love to use the tried and true, albeit threadbare, tactic and strategy of divide and conquer, thereby making the people so distracted that they don't have the energy or the political capital nor the wherewithal to really keep abreast of all these incremental steps that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists are implementing to further deteriorate the societal bonds of this great representative republic of ours. And that is a truly mischievous, dark, and twisted, as well as diabolical approach that they have, but they have been so successful with it that they see no reason to back down. In fact, at this juncture in our relatively brief yet illustrious history, the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists believe that they see a light at the end of the tunnel, and that means that their victory is within grasp. But we, in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, must stand together shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity and let them know that that light they see at the end of the tunnel, far from being their deliverance and absolution, will be their utter destruction, because it is the guiding light, the torch of liberty, which is the eternal flame of our freedom, our national heritage, and our character, our spirit, but above all, our identity as well. So why is it that I mention Constitution Day in the same breath that I mention this frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist holiday that traces back to September 5th of 1882? Well, on Friday, September, I believe it's Friday, September 16th of 2016, we will be celebrating Constitution Day in the United States of America. I believe that that is a far more fitting holiday for us to celebrate in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours, because it is more akin to who we are, both as a nation and as a people. It goes back to the foundational roots that have defined this nation going back some 235 plus years now. Of course, the historical revisionists don't want you to think of it in this fashion, folks, and the reason they don't is they don't want you to realize just how free you truly are. Rather, they'd have you embrace these penultimate things, these things that really do have no place in an open and honest, but above all, free society like that of the United States of America. By embracing Labor Day, they're trying to sit there and say that the working class should be given some sort of special platform in the United States. Now, that's not to say that I'm attempting to besmirch or belittle the efforts of the working class, but what I am saying is it goes against the very root and foundation of who we are. Because if you stop and think about it in an objective fashion, the entire purpose of equal protection under the law and that old adage that the United States of America is a nation of laws and not of men, it means that we're not supposed to create insular and discrete minorities. And we're not supposed to engage in class warfare because we're all supposed to have equal opportunities to reach the greatest amounts of achievement that we can achieve via the talents that were endowed to us by our Creator, the God of nature himself, much like how our fundamental and inalienable rights have been endowed to us by the God of nature as well. Those are the natural law tenets that form the bedrock foundation of not only our shared United States Constitution, but also our federalist, constitutionally endowed, representative Republican form of government. And remember that our founding fathers also expected this republic to be a virtuous republic. That means that we have to foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and thereby our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. Then we can do the duties and obligations and accomplish the responsibilities that are always couched with those fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. You see, that is the way that a system that is truly free works. It's based on three fundamental pillars: that of self-accountability, self-responsibility, and by working in tandem, they create self-determination. You see, isn't that an uplifting and powerful message to embrace, to realize that you, in your capacity as a true ultimate wielder of popular sovereignty in these United States of America, have the power to choose your destiny, to make whatever you want of yourself? Well, at least that is the original foundation. That is the framework. That is the edifice of this great representative republic of ours. But we see that over the years, these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists have incrementally tweaked that to such a degree that through draconian and overzealous regulation of the private sector, they are attempting to get away from that and to destroy that, to essentially eradicate it from the national conscience of the American people. And that's truly diabolical, but it makes sense when you look at the way that these just radical fundamentalist and extremist left-wing ideologues and philosophers work. They always seek to destroy that which came before. Look at the Cultural Revolution that developed in communist China under the tutelage of Mao Zedong. The Cultural Revolution was there to eradicate any semblance of the old time-honored Chinese traditions and imperial lines and history, as well as their religion. And it's because the communists realized that people would use those time-honored traditions to rise up in rebellion against this diabolical system that is there to ignore and to besmirch and abridge the individual dignity of their citizens. And it's because deep down they realize that it just can't compete in the marketplace of ideas, it being their radical, dark, twisted machinations, philosophy, and governmental approach. And it's because it's theft by any other name. Stop and think about that for a moment, folks. What these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists are attempting to foist upon you is a system that denies your own ability to think for yourself, to act for yourself, to put bread on the table for your family without some form of government encroachment or entanglement, which is truly impermissible when you look at the way that our founding fathers had always originally intended for this nation to work and operate. That is the dark and nefarious character that we are having to face. That is the harsh and stark reality that we must not only be cognizant of, but be wary of, and must be willing to take whatever steps are necessary to overcome these hurdles, obstacles, and adversity that have been placed in our path by these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists. So, as you do enjoy this day off, this supposed holiday called Labor Day, just recall what it is. Recall what its roots are, and reject those roots. You could consider this rather to be a true precursor to Constitution Day, the day that we should be celebrating, the day that should bring American citizens together by right of their birth or naturalization. Why? Because it is through the Constitution that we are defined. It is through the Constitution that we are unified. That's why the national identity of the United States of America is confined within the clear and concise language contained inside the four corners of that sacred, natural law-inspired document that truly is the longest contiguous or uninterrupted running constitutional document in the entire course of human events. It shows that we have to find the deeper meaning of what it is. It shows that we have to find those common denominators that link us both as a nation and as a people. And of course, it's why we have so oft times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that the key to unlocking the chains and shackles of governmental tyranny, despotism, oppression, and just servitude has been with us since the inception of this nation, and it is none other than our shared United States Constitution. Folks, it literally is that important. It is that cut and dry. It is that black and white, because it is that document that provides the sole foundation of who we are. And again, it links into that old adage that I've already mentioned on today's program, and indeed on previous episodes, that of the United States of America is a nation of laws and not of men. It's because we are based on a philosophy, and that philosophy is codified in the supreme law of the land, and pursuant to the Supremacy Clause, or Article 6, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution, it states that the Constitution itself is the supreme law of the land. Now, unfortunately, this is not taught in our institutions of education, or if it is, it's just done in such a precursory manner, and they try and treat it as though it's some quaint, antiquated thing that has no application to a robust and fast-paced modern society like that in which we live today. But of course, nothing could be further from the truth, because when you recall that what forms the bedrock foundation of our supreme law of the land, it is the natural law tenets. And those natural law tenets, by their own nature and design, from providence above, are timeless. So that means they're just as applicable today as they were at the inception of this country some 235 years ago, as they will be, God willing, some 235 years from now. But of course, being a virtuous republic, it means that we, in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, must be proactive in maintaining and safeguarding those rights. That's part of the duties, obligations, and above all responsibilities that automatically couch to those fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. You see, that's what makes us so fortunate as a nation and as a people, because we are the beneficiaries of the greatest birthright of any people on earth. And that birthright is the ability to enjoy and exercise our rights and freedoms, to strive to be a more perfect union and people that can be done without the fear of governmental encroachment, or without the government being able to abridge or belittle those rights. That is truly a unique cultural aspect of who we are. And that's why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have a lot of problem with the so-called alternative right or alt-right. It's because they want to reject that. They want to claim that that is a weak position, a weak philosophy, some quaint, antiquated thing, much like the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist. You see, but the major difference between the alt-right and the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist is that the socialists want to change, through that dark and twisted game of semantics, the meaning of equality. In their mind, equality means equal results as opposed to equal opportunity. However, with respect to the alt-right, which are based off of these bizarre philosophies that developed in 1930s Europe, they don't believe in equality at all. They want a tribal sort of mentality, a race-based defined culture. Now, in a way, that plays directly into the hands of the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists, because if you recall, part of their entire goal of implementing those tried and true, albeit threadbare tactics and strategies of divide and conquer is to embrace what they have so twistedly named identity politics. You see, all that we have suffered throughout the rise up of domestic terrorist organizations like the Black Lives Matters organization, that's dabbling in identity politics. All of this crap about safe spaces and white privilege and all of that, that is based in identity politics. But the truly nefarious and dangerous aspect with respect to the alt-right is that they say that, yes, there should be white privilege, and it should be that they are just inherently by their nature considered superior to any other type of culture or race. But again, when you look at the self-evident truths that Thomas Jefferson penned down in our Declaration of Independence, you see that he said that we believe that there are self-evident truths. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their creator with certain fundamental and unalienable rights, and that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That right there, folks, goes against everything that the alt-right and indeed the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist left are trying to foist down our throats, to cram down our throats and against our will. And the reason it is diametrically opposed to that is because it is based in the truth. It is that aspect and characteristic of our national character, spirit, history, but above all, identity, that has propelled this nation to such lofty heights in our relatively brief yet illustrious history. And the last thing that we should do, either as a nation or as a people, is to turn our backs on those bedrock foundations and principles that form who we are. And so what it shows, particularly keeping it in the context of Labor Day, is that these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists are able to normalize things that would otherwise be abhorrent to society as a whole. These things that are by their very nature diametrically opposed to those natural law tenets that form the bedrock foundation of our Constitution and our representative Republican form of government. And again, folks, there's really no way around this. But you see, the way that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists and their allies in the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, as well as the historical revisionist and Common Core education standard bearers, have infiltrated so many pillars of our society, they are ensuring that the up-and-coming generations don't know just exactly who they are and where they come from, nor do they understand completely why it is so important to foster a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of their Constitution and thereby their fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. That is the danger of the way that they utilize basically the dark and twisted game of semantics that we've warned about going back to our premiere episode of September 11th of last year, and the way that they teach history and the way they cover news. It all works like a trifecta to unravel the societal fabric of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. And again, folks, that is truly a dark and twisted place. It's a place that should have no welcome area in an open, free, and honest society like that of the United States of America. So again, it requires that we be vigilant. It requires, firstly, that we know about the problem, that we understand the history of it, and then that we begin to appropriate it to use for our own benefit. So you see, Labor Day should not be viewed as some socialist holiday as it was originally intended to be. It should be changed into a type of Liberty Day, a day in which we realize that our founding fathers were about to go forth and implement the Constitution. Because remember that Constitution Day is slated for Friday, September 16th of this year. And that means that one of the things that we're going to ask you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members, to do is on that day, do take a moment to reflect upon the Constitution. Do take a moment to read your Constitution on that day, to celebrate the fact that it is an intrinsic part of who we are, and that it explains how we have managed to accomplish all of the great and marvelous things that we have in our relatively brief yet illustrious history, because it is through that understanding and it is through celebrating that we come closer together as a people. It is that way that we will be able to stand shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity, forming that more perfect union that our founding fathers set about to create with the Constitution. Recall that the opening lines to the preamble to our shared United States Constitution starts with "We the people." That means that it's all of us in our capacity as citizens, whether we be natural born or naturalized, that created this government. We were the ones that delegated the power and authority for the government to exist, and that government is supposed to serve at the whim and consent of we the people in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty. And again, it is by doing that that we begin to take back this nation from those charlatans, those frauds, those hucksters, those carnival barkers and snake oil salesmen that would do anything to pit American citizen against American citizen in the hopes that we annihilate one another. That is their goal. That is what they have been working for, and we should reject it wholeheartedly, because there really is no other option. Now, one of the other things that Barber mentions in his article here is that the socialists did start Labor Day, but they don't get it. And what he started to delve into is, what is it that forms the foundation of our Western philosophy and mindset? Well, for the longest time, since the collapse of the Roman Empire, it was Christianity, Christian virtues and values, the Judeo-Christian principles, which are part of the natural law tenets. Because when you look at the way that the natural law is supposed to work, it basically operates from this idea that it is a universal code of conduct, something that is inscribed on the hearts and souls of mankind by the God of nature. And you see that that is an intrinsic part of this nation. It goes back to our foundations, as we have so oftentimes reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. And so when we keep that common strain or thread of our culture and our heritage in mind, we begin to understand that Labor Day was designed essentially as a way to strike out against that, to try and deceive the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, who are none other than we the people. So what we see is that it was the influence of Christianity which led the West to gradually raise its view of common labor. And the reason we can say that with the utmost conviction that we do is because we see that it was through those natural law tenets, going back to that boggy field in the summer of 1215 in Runnymede, England, where King John I of Robin Hood and Ivanhoe fame was forced by the baronage of England to sign the Great Charter, or Magna Carta. Now, what Magna Carta was attempting to do was to set in not just standards for currency, standard weights and measurements, but also to have what would become due process under the law, meaning that the law of the land would reign supreme. And you see that that is another common thread and common denominator that we still have applicable today with respect to our Constitution, because as we have said so many times, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, our shared United States Constitution composes the supreme law of the land. And so, in other words, this notion of consent of the governed comes from those natural law tenets that are based in the Judeo-Christian principles, values, and ethics. And it's part of what Barber cited here from a guy by the name of Rodney Stark, who put out a book known as The Victory of Reason, which just discusses how we are better off with rights and that we are just better off in general than we were under the old pagan Roman system, and than we would be under a frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist, leftist, atheist type dystopia. But we see that the current wielders of the reins of political power in this once thriving and flourishing representative Republican vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours, folks, are diametrically opposed to this notion. That's why we see that our time-honored values, traditions, and institutions, such as the institution of marriage, has been attacked. That's why we see the so-called gay or homosexual agenda becoming center stage within the American arena of politics. And you see that, again, it's part of this balkanization and identity politics that the left in particular have been foisting upon us. And part of the reason that it has been able to gain so much ground, particularly throughout these two disastrous terms of the Barack Hussein Obama regime, is because we have leadership in the gutless opposition party, or GOP, that is just allowing it. Because they either find that it's too difficult to try and go against the tide of corruption, or else they are just collaborating with it, much as is the case with Speaker of the House Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan and Senate Majority Leader Mitch the Turtle McConnell, because they too are Fabians. It's just that they disagree with the amount that the incremental approach should be taken, at least at the speed of which it should be. Now, it was under Barack Hussein Obama that we see that they were pushing to have this just accelerated exponentially. Again, it's back to that whole statement that he made during his first run for the highest office in the land back in 2008, when he said that we were just 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America. And then there's another aspect with respect to the Obamas that we need to keep in mind as well, particularly when we are reflecting upon true meanings of certain things that have become new norms in this culture and society of ours. And that is when Michelle Obama went out back in 2008 and said for the first time she was proud of her country. I mean, folks, you really can't make this stuff up. It is there for anyone to see who is looking at this or observing this in any form of an objective fashion. And it truly is diabolical. But I think we do need to have a moment here to recall exactly what she said from her own words. So I'm going to cue up a soundbite for that. And I've got that queued up right now.
I don't think we've seen that. But what we've learned over this year is that hope is making a comeback. It is making a comeback. And let me tell you something. For the first time in my adult lifetime, I'm really proud of my country. And not just because Barack has done well, but because I think people are hungry for change. And I have been desperate to see our country moving in that direction and just not feeling so alone in my frustration and disappointment. I've seen people who are hungry to be unified around some basic common issues, and it's made me proud. And I feel privileged to be a part of even witnessing this, traveling around states all over this country and being reminded that there is more that unites us than divides us, that the struggles of a farmer in Iowa are no different than what's happening on the south side of Chicago, that people are feeling the same pain and wanting the same things for their families.
So there you have it, folks. She was sitting there saying that she's hoping that and was hungering for people to yearn to be basically unified by something else other than the supreme law of the land. That she wanted us to be unified in struggles, not in rights, not under the law, but to basically, again, try and say that the only thing that we share is misery. But again, nothing could be further from the truth. That is so far divorced from and divided from everything that we stand for, both as a nation and as a people. And it really is shocking that she would go out in front of the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and reiterate such rubbish, such nonsense. Because again, it shows that she is completely disregarding and ignoring the true history and the true development of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. Yes, people are yearning for change, but I don't think it's the type of hopey changey that they were foisting upon us 8 years ago. And we certainly see that that's not the case after the disastrous 2 terms of the Barack Hussein Obama regime. We have not been improved. Our lot in life has not been made better. We have just been basically forced to bear the burden of an out of control, overzealous, and certainly illegitimate and rogue and tyrannical government that is diametrically opposed to the foundational image that our founding fathers dreamed of at the inception of this nation some 235 years ago. And so it falls back onto our shoulders again, this onus of duty, obligation, but above all responsibility to stand up and say no. You see, it really should have been controversial what she said, more so than what it wound up being, because essentially what she's saying is she doesn't find any pride or value in who we are as a nation and as a people, that she wants to fundamentally and drastically transform. And I would go out on a limb here and say irreparably transform and redefine the United States of America away from being a constitutionally endowed federalist representative republic to some alien and foreign, just frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist dystopia that is more of an Orwellian nightmare than it is for a nation of free, sovereign individuals. And so again, it shows that we have to ask these prodding, soul-searching questions to get back to what really does matter in this country. It's as my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, likes to put it, it's that we have to get back to basics. And as we have so oft-times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence the Wright Flyer, basics in the United States of America is found within the clear and concise language contained in the 4 corners of our shared United States Constitution. Folks, it really is that simple. It is that which will help place us back onto the path to prosperity. But in order to fully accomplish that and to achieve that sort of, liberation from this type of Fabian socialist cabal that has become the new norm in these United States of America, it means that we, the people, must be the ones that save this country. And again, that goes back to the very design of this nation. That goes back to the way that our founding fathers observed the natural order of things, what is known as the natural law tenets that form the very foundation, the bedrock foundation of the Constitution and our representative Republican form of government. And, I'm sure many recall that throughout these last several successive decades, generations even, this nonchalant term of democracy has been thrown around. Well, the United States of America is not, nor should it ever be, a democracy. And of course, that again draws us back to the prophetic words of one of our most brilliant founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, when he used an alliteration to define what democracy is. Because first we'll give you just a little bit of the technical details of what a democracy is, and then we will go to his prophetic words. A democracy, by its very nature, solely recognizes the rights of a majority, thereby creating a tyranny of the majority, whereas a representative republic allows us to have and recognize the rights of the individual popular sovereign, recognizing the human dignity of the individual, recognizing those fundamental pillars of being able to be self-accountable, self-responsible, and those things working in tandem, thereby being self-determinate. But on the flip side of it, a democracy also allows for there to be tyrannies of the minority, because you delve into the principles and tactics and strategies of divide and conquer, and you create insular and discrete collective minorities to where their rights are recognized above the rights of the individual. And a perfect case in point of that is, look at the way that the bakers who refuse to bake cakes for same-sex marriages are being harassed by the legal system and are seeing laws that are truly violative of the letter and spirit of the supreme law of the land, that of our shared United States Constitution, implemented against them to attack them because their rights as individuals should be trumped by the collective rights of a group. That's what a democracy does. And so that leads us directly to the near prophetic words of Benjamin Franklin when he defined a democracy as 2 wolves and a single lamb voting for what's for dinner. Well, guess what? That lamb, under a tyranny of the majority, is going to lose out every time. But on the flip side of that, if there was a tyranny of the minority, it would be that the lamb would prevent the wolves from being able to eat, so they'd starve to death. That would be your tyranny of the minority. Whereas in a representative republic, the wolves and the sheep would have to find a way that the rights of each are recognized. And so it means that there would be other alternatives. Maybe that kibble could be formed for the wolves. It's based on that. It's based on a balance. And you see, that's the amazing thing about the foundation of our representative Republican form of government. Many times Americans like to think that we're uncompromising on things, but the very foundation and root of our government is the Great Compromise, this idea of having a bicameral or 2-house legislature. The legislative branch of government consists of the population-based House of Representatives, what is known as the lower house, and the Senate, for which each state has 2. Now, it's a lot different than it was at the foundation of this nation, particularly with the ratification of the 17th Amendment, which allows for direct vote in the Senate, which I think has been detrimental in so much as it's taken away the proper tenets of federalism and has weakened the quasi-sovereign status of the several states. But still, that was the compromise. But at the same time, there are certain things that cannot be compromised. Those things that cannot be compromised are our fundamental and inalienable rights, which were endowed to us by our Creator, who is none other than the God of nature himself. Now, where that comes from is another great founding father of ours, George Mason, who was called upon to help draft the Declaration of Rights for the state of Virginia. And during that time, and during that process, he came to the inexorable conclusion that the American citizens are sovereign. And more so than just being sovereign, they are endowed with fundamental and inalienable rights, and that no rightful, legitimate earthly authority without due process under the law can abridge those rights. Now, why would the due process under the law part come under this? Well, think about the way that our system of justice works. The idea is that we only punish those who have encroached upon the fundamental and inalienable God-given rights of their fellow individual popular sovereign. That is an intrinsic part of our nature. And so we see that the Declaration of Rights for the state of Virginia became the very foundational basis for the Bill of Rights. And that was not just some instantaneous thing, something that was just going to be put in. There was a long, drawn out, and bitter fight over that, because when you stop and reanalyze the history of the Constitutional Convention there in Philadelphia in 1787, it didn't originally start with the Bill of Rights. In fact, the Bill of Rights were not ratified until December of 1791. So that shows you it took years to hash that out. But it was a compromise. It was a compromise between 2 factions, that of Federalist and Anti-Federalist. The Federalists believed that the Constitution itself, by its clear and concise language in the articles that were in it, was enough. Whereas the Anti-Federalists inherently understood that part of the nature of government is to be diametrically opposed to the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. And so that was a compromise. But with respect to these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists, they cannot be compromised with. You can't negotiate with those who merely seek your utter annihilation and destruction. You see, that was the major differing point between the Federalist and Anti-Federalists and the true dyed-in-the-wool constitutional compositionists of today with the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists of today. And it's that back then they still had an overarching image of what they were trying to create. And it was in the position of benefiting the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. Whereas the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists don't believe in that. They don't believe in our freedom. They don't believe in individual sovereignty. And therefore, they are pushing a tired trope of collectivism. But collectivism doesn't work. Anywhere it's been tried on God's green earth, it has failed. And I think the best case in point of this would be the Soviet Union. That ultimately failed. It ultimately did not work because collectivism disregards human nature. That's been the greatest shortcoming of the Communist Manifesto as well as the dialectic that Marx put out. First and foremost, Marx tried to convince everyone that history is linearly progressive. But no, history is cyclical. Why? Because human beings are fallible, and therefore it's so easy for us to ignore the mistakes of the past. And when we do that, we are doomed to repeat history, albeit in a slightly different fashion than how it originally occurred. But human nature is that it is cyclical. We act in a cyclical way and in a cyclical fashion. And therefore, it makes no sense to try and say that history is linearly progressive and that all of history is based on class. Because again, when you look at the foundation of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours, you see that it's based on natural law tenets. That's not history or class. That is based off of the natural law. That timeless nature and law that is inscribed on the hearts of men everywhere. But Marx didn't believe that. Remember that Marx went out and tried to claim that religion was the opiate of the masses. Marx also tried to decry the time-honored institution of marriage as nothing less than legalized prostitution. Again, it's all attacking the ability of the individual to think and act and to deliberate for themselves. That is diametrically opposed to everything that we hold near and dear in the United States. And it shows why they sit there, as Michelle Obama did all the way back in 2008, some 8 years ago, and say for the first time in her adult life, she's proud of her country. Not because of what the country had accomplished, not because of the great stalwart of liberty that the United States of America has always represented in its relatively brief and illustrious history. No, it was based on this idea of changing it to a frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist agenda that is diabolical. And there really is no other way to describe it other than being dark and twisted and diabolical, because it's evil. It's evil because it tries to say that you as an individual don't count. It's only you as a group, and certain groups deserve better rights than others. Now, if that sounds familiar, try and think back to what the pigs in George Orwell's Animal Farm put up on the barn. All animals are created equal. All right, there you have the natural law. But some animals are more equal than others. There you have a perversion of it. There you have the attempt to unravel what is the ultimate truth, what it is that matters. And that is what their nature has always been about. They go in and pervert things. And so that causes us to look back at, again, the foundation of the Fabian society. Remember that the Fabians trace their origins back to 19th century Great Britain. And in Great Britain, they had adopted an original iconography of that of a wolf in sheep's clothing. Now, a wolf in sheep's clothing is the way that Scripture described that Satan would pervert society. Satan doesn't seek to destroy so much as he does to pervert, to try and spit in the eye of God. Why? Because he realizes that he cannot be perfect, but he's jealous of what God is able to do. And that has been the fight that was throughout history of good and evil. And it too is cyclical. But recall that when Marx says that religion is the opiate of the masses, he doesn't want to think about that. He doesn't want you to focus upon that, because then it weakens the message that he's putting forth. But his message is that of perversion. His message is that of tarnishing. And the only reason they're destructive is they want to tear down what's there to put up a weak system that cannot work. And one of the most laughable things about the communist dialectic, the Marxist dialectic, penned by Karl Marx in the 1840s and 50s, was that he said, once the entire world becomes communist, government will wither on the vine. As if those agent provocateurs of centralized command and control, meaning the central government being the master of everything, would just simply allow their power to slip through their fingers, or that natural animosities that exist and cultural traditions that exist would just vanish. That's baloney. That's bovine excrement mixed with equine excrement. Humanity has a mix of being a social animal, but also an individual. It is the spiritual aspect of us that makes us the individual. Remember that the greatest gift God gave us, and the gift that we are so apt to abuse, is that of free will. That's what caused paradise to fall, according to Scripture. But it's also what separates us from all of other creation, all of God's other creations. It is this fact that we're free. It is this fact that we have the ability to act for ourselves. So what really makes a decent system, one that works, is one that recognizes that we each have our own unique individual sets of talents that were endowed to us by the God of nature that we can use to the best of our benefit. That is what it means to have equal opportunity. And so, keeping in line with this notion of what Labor Day is, the original founders of Labor Day were trying to say, no, it shouldn't be based on equal opportunity. Rather, it should be based on equal outcome. Now, what does that mean, equal outcome? Well, it means that it's unfair that people are able to use their natural talents and abilities to get ahead in life, and that we should all be equally miserable. And it brings up one of those phrases from the late and great Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom during the 1980s, in that she said that not only is America formed on philosophy, it's that they desire to be free, and that socialism spreads misery. And that ties into a phrase from another great English Prime Minister, that of Winston Churchill, who said that, and I'm paraphrasing here, that socialism only makes people equal in that we are all equally miserable under it. And that's true. Socialism is a miserable system because it disregards what we are capable of. It disregards the better angels of our nature and attempts to create an insular and discrete minority system where some animals are more equal than others. But that is diametrically opposed to the natural law tenets that form the foundational bedrock basis of our nation and our supreme law. And so when we realize that, it empowers us to basically stand up, shoulder to shoulder, in solidarity and unity, and reject these agent provocateurs of this wicked and diabolical philosophy of governmental servitude. Because that's what socialism is. Socialism says that the means of production are owned by a collective. Well, in a sense, that is a type of oligarchy. And recall that one of the great philosophers who admired America from her earliest days, Alexis de Tocqueville from France, literally said that anyone who supports any flavor, form, or facet of socialism is actually advocating a new age form of feudalism. And it makes sense. Remember that feudalism is based off of a caste system. It was that medieval system that said that society must be broken into those who rule, those who produce, and those who fight. The rulers, of course, are the upper crust of nobility, the king being the ultimate sovereign. The ones who fight are your lesser nobility and your landlords, and those who work or produce are the peasants. And recall also that the word villain, we think of it as some bad guy today. Well, originally it meant a landless peasant, a serf, someone who owed everything to the landlord and had to work for the landlord. And yes, it was considered an insult to be called a villain. So all of that works through. And these things were not supposed to be able to be transitory, meaning you couldn't move from one caste to the other. Well, the socialists are that way too. Look at the way that they try and carve out a special niche for themselves, to have it to where certain laws don't apply to them, but apply to the rest of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. And again, it shows that they are not interested in the true natural law tenets and aspects of our culture and our society, again, because they fully realize that in a free marketplace of ideas, that their twisted machinations are going to be rejected each and every time. Why? Because it does not recognize, it fails to recognize the dignity and decency and capabilities of the individuals. When you look at a piece of fabric or cloth, what is it that gives that fabric its rigidity, its ability to be a cohesive unit? It's the individual fibers. And so they forget that it's the individual citizen that makes society great. It is the individual citizen that gives a society its unique characteristics, cultures, and customs. And they just want to push for this type of barbaric type of caste system. And so I think that Alexis de Tocqueville was truly visionary when he said that those who are supporting this type of socialism are in fact just pushing for a new age form of feudalism. And of course that brings us to the words of one of our most outspoken founding fathers, that of Thomas Paine, who said that monarchy and feudalism were essentially the worst types of government ever devised by the wicked mind of mankind. Why? Because again, it goes to a collectivist mentality in which people are forced into artificial classes. And again, why would Marxism and socialism have all of these hallmarks of feudalism? Because recall that Marx tried to base his entire view of economics, of government, of philosophy on, first of all, history being linearly progressive, but second of all, that it's based on class. Everything revolves around class, that class is the only thing that matters. But nothing could be further from the truth, because there are so many other separate individual elements and aspects of culture and society that play into this, particularly the natural law tenets, which by their very nature are timeless, that he disregards. And he does so to his own great detriment. He does so to prove that his system cannot, must not, and will not ever be viable or workable. That's just the facts, folks. There's one final aspect that I want to cover today, and that is with Barack Hussein Obama, who's traveled over there to China and has just been smeared by them. Remember, he was not given the red carpet treatment that is customary of world leaders, particularly the leader of the free world, and was forced to enter out of the back of the jet. Well, he used that opportunity to praise the just outrageous conduct of the San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick, who claimed that he refused to stand up for the national anthem because he believes that the flag and this nation stands for oppressing black people, which of course is laughable when you consider that he has risen to have more wealth than the vast majority of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. And again, it's just part of this identity politics. But basically, Obama was using a chance when he was in a frothing at the mouth, radical, fundamentalist, left-wing nation, that of China, a one-party system, a communistical system, to praise these words, deeds, and actions of a spoiled brat back here in the United States of America. You see, folks, this is what happens when the twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism, those very doctrines that we have declared war upon here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have become new societal norms. It shows that degradation and lack of respect have become hallmarks of the way that the left is engaging in leadership. Of course, nothing could be more diametrically opposed to the true foundational image that our founding fathers dreamed of at the inception of our nation some 235 plus years ago. Again, it requires us to do a bit of soul searching in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours to once again rediscover our identity, because that has been perhaps the most successful yet dark and twisted machination that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists, their allies in the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, and indeed the historical revisionists and standard bearers of Common Core education have accomplished. They have just incessantly, for well over a century and a half now, folks, gone after our national heritage, character, spirit, but above all, identity. And think of it. What Colin Kaepernick has said when he is refusing to stand for the national anthem is that he doesn't believe in our natural law tenets. He doesn't believe in equal opportunity, and that he's pushing for this diabolical form of equal opportunity, or not equal opportunity, but equal outcomes. So where does that go? Where does that leave us? Where does that put us, both as a nation and as a people, when we have the leader of the free world who's already been snubbed by the Chinese because he has gone so far out of his way to weaken the position of the United States in the geopolitical sphere, goes out and praises the actions of a lunatic? Now, I'm not one of those people that will sit there and deny that Colin Kaepernick has the right to do what he did, albeit an idiotic thing that he did. But remember that one of the things that we have constantly reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, is that the fundamental pillars that are quintessential aspects of the American character and spirit is that of self-responsibility, self-accountability, and thereby those two items working in tandem, self-determination. It means that, yes, he's free to do that, but he is now having to suffer the consequences of choosing to do so. Just because you have the right to do something, you have to realize how it impacts other people as well. Now, already I can hear some of the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists in their shrill, disharmonious, and discordinal voices going up in a cacophony of redundant noise, saying, then, well, you should therefore believe that the Second Amendment is not applicable today, and that it meant muskets and things like that. Wrong. Because, yes, there are laws on the books for abusing the right. And yes, people who abuse it should be held accountable. Those who go out and kill should be charged with murder. But that does not mean that you turn around and infringe upon the rights of decent, law-abiding, hard-working, red-blooded American citizens. You see, that's where they are just so wholeheartedly intellectually disingenuous. It's because they have bought into this notion of identity politics. Yet again, they don't believe that it's a right that should belong to all of us in our individual capacities. They believe that collectivism must come in, that collectivist ideology must come in, once again eradicating the human dignity of the individual. All of this is part of an overarching pattern of conduct and a belief system that is diametrically opposed to the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. And again, folks, that's why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, say it is imperative that we foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution so that we thereby gain an understanding and an appreciation for those fundamental and inalienable rights which were endowed to us by our Creator, who happens to be none other than the God of nature himself. You see, it goes back to another old adage, and I know that I've repeated this almost to the point of it being ad nauseum now, but it is so on point that it bears repeating again as I sit here and speak into this microphone, conveying this message unto you, and that is this, that the whole of the United States is greater than the sum of its parts, and it is the aspect of those natural law tenets, which by their very nature are timeless, just as applicable today as they were at our foundation some 235 plus years ago, as God willing they will be 235 years from today, that makes us greater. It's what truly represents who we are, both as a nation and as a people. But of course, the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media is not going to cover it in such a way for you to realize that that is an intrinsic part of our national heritage, character, spirit, and identity. No, because again, it would work against their twisted propagandistic Fabian socialist narrative and agenda. So again, it shows that we do have to read between the lines to be able to get at exactly what it is that they are trying to foist against us and upon us, particularly when you consider that what they're doing is trying to go against the consent and will of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. That's where we are, folks. That is what these people have been working so tirelessly and meticulously and patiently for the past century and a half now. They believe they see a light at the end of the tunnel and that that light will be their victory. Now, I know that I mentioned that in the opening segment, but it goes deeper. It truly goes deeper because everywhere we turn, we see that there are attempts to redefine us, to go after us. And perhaps one of the strongest areas where that has been allowed to come forth is in our institutions of education. Recall that there have been just these numerous attempts to try and push for the eradication of freedom of expression because it is offensive to some people. It's as though the up-and-coming generations have been led to believe that there is some sort of God-given right to be free from offense. But you won't find that anywhere within the clear and concise language contained inside the four corners of the Constitution. Unless, of course, you're going to include Article Non, Section Existent, Clause 0, which is nestled between the bovine and equine excrement clauses. They don't exist. It's all just part of their frothing at the mouth agenda to basically engage in what is a rather innocuous sounding identity politics, where they try and make it sound benign, but what it really is divide and conquer. There is no other way to describe it other than that, and that is diabolical, and has no place within an open and honest and above all free society like that of the United States of America. Because again, it tries to change that old adage that has been a quintessential part of this nation since its foundation, that the United States of America is a nation of laws and not of men. So they want separate kinds of laws. And we see that that allows all sorts of rank and rampant corruption to plague and infiltrate the upper echelons of our federal government, and indeed it trickles down to all of the other supposed inferior branches of government and levels of government, so that we find ourselves facing a truly untenable, unsustainable, and unacceptable tyranny. And that's where we are. And what makes the 2016 presidential election cycle so tragic is this was our opportunity to back away from that, to break away from the chains and shackles of governmental servitude, bondage, and tyranny. But we blew that opportunity because there were so many disillusioned conservatives and so many of the Democrats who were allowed to cross over and open primaries to taint, corrupt, and destroy the electoral process, the primary process of the gutless opposition party, or GOP. And that is unacceptable. But it is the harsh nature of reality that we face right now as I sit here and speak into this microphone, conveying this message unto you. So, how do we overcome these deleterious and detrimental impacts and conditions that are facing this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours? Well, the way we do it is to once again get back to basics, to go back to the United States Constitution. Now, believe me, folks, I fully understand that that is far easier said than done. But we in the United States of America have never bowed down and capitulated to have the hurdles, obstacles, and adversities that have been placed in our path overcome us. We have always done the difficult thing, and if you really want to get Americans riled up and to do what they need to push us back towards freedom and liberty and to accomplish the seemingly unaccomplishable, it is to tell them that they can't do it. You see, we are an ornery group of people, but not in a bad way. It means that we don't give up. It means that we continue to strive for perfection, even though we know that the human condition cannot achieve that. In other words, it's back to what Maggie Thatcher said, that the United States of America is founded upon a philosophy. It means that we strive to achieve greater. Why? Because it is what defines us and drives us to be better than what we are, to achieve that which makes all of us better. And that is how we have to be, because it is who we have always been. And so, as we see this Labor Day holiday, which was originally designed to try and delve into that rather destructive and divisive ideology of income inequality and class warfare, all of that nonsense, we must recall what it is that made us better, what it is that put us into such a lofty position in our relatively brief and illustrious history. And that is our individual spirit of creativity, our ingenuity, our ability to rise above the fray and to really push for something greater. And the other thing that we have to do to ensure that that occurs is that we hold those accountable who have done everything to try and tear us apart and try to pit American citizen against American citizen in the hopes that we tear out each other's jugulars and bleed this nation dry. Why? Because ultimately they want to kill us. They want to destroy and eradicate all that the United States is and has ever represented. And that brings us to an article that comes out of The Atlantic. And it talks about Rush Limbaugh's ultimate betrayal of his audience. And it's back that he claims that he never took Trump seriously on immigration, but he neglected to tell his listeners. You see, folks, part of what you must do if you are going to go out there and convey a message and to discuss with people and to disseminate information and to try and uplift people is to share exactly where it is you're coming from. It's why we have always said that when it comes to what matters in this nation, we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, are dedicated to promoting our Constitution and getting back to strict adherence to the fundamental tenets contained within its four corners at all levels of government, because that is what frees us. That is what gives us the solutions to be better. But that's the problem with Rush Limbaugh. He has betrayed that. And so many have. Recall that Edmund Kozak over there at LifeZets with Laura Incomp's group basically came out and said that we are fools and morons to try and go back to the Constitution, that we are trying to hold that as a perfect document. No. Wrong, cucksucker. What we are trying to do is to show that the Constitution inherently understands the imperfections of humanity. That's why there is Article 5's amendment process. That's why the preamble to the Bill of Rights, because yes, folks, the Constitution has two preambles, one for the entire document itself and one for the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution, says that those declaratory statements and clauses, once properly ratified by 3/4 of the states, become a part of the Constitution as if they were there when it was originally drafted and ratified. So he doesn't realize that that is understanding that we are imperfect. And in fact, it says to create a more perfect union, meaning that our founding fathers intrinsically understood that perfection could not be achieved on this earthly mortal plane. That's something that occurs in the afterlife, that is something that comes to the forefront by God's nature and in God's realm and arena alone. But of course, these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists and the alternative alt-right don't care. They just don't. So we see that everywhere we turn, there's all of these attempts to further divide the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, we the people. And that takes me to something that Red State has put out. Brandon Morse at Red State, who wrote something that said maybe income inequality is a good thing. It's a popular buzzword now used by the left, and it drives the narrative that America is somehow unfair to those in lower income brackets. And of course, the reason that I bring this up as we are in Labor Day is because of the foundations of Labor Day yet again. And we've seen everything from speeches, protests, riots, and every other thing else where it's the 1% doing everything to besmirch and belittle the little guy. But it's nonsense. The reason that we have the disparity in income is because of the draconian and overzealous regulation of the private sector by this out-of-control, rogue, tyrannical, and ultimately illegitimate federal government that just doesn't give a damn about our individual integrity and our human dignity in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty. So you see, it is once again this narrative of the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists designed to pit American citizen against American citizen. It's all part of their goal, tactic, and strategy of divide and conquer. So why is it that they push for this? Well, it's that they hate the free market. They hate this idea that we can go out and benefit one another without the need of some overarching basic caste system. Again, going back to this whole notion first put forth by that philosopher Alexis de Tocqueville when he said that those who embrace any form, flavor, or facet of socialism are actually advocating for a new age form of feudalism. It's that they don't want us to think for ourselves. They think they know better. And stop and think about it. What does a free market do? It turns scarcity into abundance. It looks for a need or a niche market and fills it. Again, that is individual ingenuity. That is directly in line with the natural law tenets that form the bedrock foundation of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. There's no way around that. There's no way to deny this. But that's why the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists engage in all of these attempts to revise our history, to try and erase this mindset from the up-and-coming generations in the hopes that they can pin down even those generations which have yet to be born to be exposed to this diabolical system that truly has no place in an open, honest, but above all free society like that of the United States of America. This is the simple facts of life. These are just the facts, folks, and we must be able to deal with them. But it comes down to how the left is just trying to redefine us. And when you look at how Obama had been out there praising Colin Kaepernick for besmirching this nation, it shows unequivocally that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists do loathe and despise the national character, heritage, spirit, but above all identity of America and her citizens. Why? Because again, for the longest amount of time, we have withstood their attempts to fundamentally transform us. because of that fact that we are founded upon rugged individualism and this understanding that the natural law tenets flow through every form and facet of our society and every level of government and every branch of government. But they do not like that. They, again, want to be able to allow people to just be dependent upon the government. That's all they care about. That's all they push for. It's all about power and control. And corruption fits squarely in the middle of that. So it's power, control, and corruption. That is the trifecta of the left. That is the left trinity, the trinity of evil, if you will, for lack of a better term. And again, it's not something that the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media are going to convey to you, because they don't want you to accept that. They don't want you to come to that realization and that rationalization of exactly what it is that their frothing at the mouth agenda is trying to accomplish. And so they want to destroy anything that gives stability. Again, falling back on the Cloward and Piven principle. Recall that that was formed by two egghead academicians back in the 1950s to try and overwhelm the welfare system of the United States of America in the hopes that the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people, would be knocked to our knees and forced to crawl to the government, which created the very problem in the first place, to have a solution. A solution of a totalitarian, centralized, government-controlled welfare state. But it's more than that. It is also to fundamentally transform us away from being a constitutionally endowed, federalist, representative, Republican form of government into this diabolical, dark and twisted, frothing at the mouth, Fabian socialist dystopia that is an Orwellian nightmare. All the way back to that notion again of what he said in Animal Farm, of the way that the pigs, who had taken control of that society there, just put up, emblazoned on that barn, all animals are created equal, but some animals are more equal than others. It's a contradictory line of thought. And of course, it exposes the great chicanery that is left-wing ideology. It's not something that works. Why? Because it disregards human nature. It disregards our individual characteristics, needs, and ingenuity. It attempts to force us into collective boxes that don't work. Yes, mankind is social by nature, but society is made strong by its individual members. That's why we have a social contract. And of course, the Constitution of the United States of America is the greatest social compact or contract ever devised by the hands of men, yet divinely inspired by providence above, because it is based on individual dignity, human dignity, and righteousness, and virtue, and values, and those natural law tenets. And so, therefore, it is the longest contiguous or uninterrupted running constitutional document in the entire course of human events. No other nation on earth has created as open, honest, or free a system of government as we have here in the United States of America. And the last thing that we should do, both as a nation and as a people, is to turn our backs on that and abandon that and to bow down and capitulate to these diabolical and twisted machinations of those who would turn us against everything that we love and hold near and dear in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. So it's once again the duty, obligation, and above all responsibility of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people, to proactively maintain and safeguard our fundamental and inalienable rights. But nobody's talking about that in the 2016 election. Nobody is talking about how we must be free and how we must stay vigilant. But we do see that there is this push for all of these attempts to redefine us, to try and confine us into the unacceptable and twisted machinations of the left, that is pitting American citizen against American citizen and wants to really just deny us who we are. And you see, a lot of this comes from the way that we don't want to call the Islamo-fascist state of ISIS a true threat, and we don't want to address how Islam is at the heart of their twisted goals and machinations, and therefore we just try and use that cancerous doctrine of moral relativism to place the blame on our feet, because the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists are the blame America first crowd. They've been doing that for decade after successive decade, and they have been pushing for a sense of shame, because deep down in the cockles of their black and twisted hearts, they want Americans to essentially feel an overwhelming sense of shame when they proclaim to the world that we are citizens of the United States. That is the most unacceptable, most god-awful thing that they have done. But it's the cornerstone of their ideology, their philosophy, and their dark and twisted machinations. And they will double down on those efforts because, again, they think they see a light at the end of the tunnel, which means that their diligent, meticulous, and relentless efforts to unravel the societal fabric of these United States of America is within grasp. They literally think that they are within victory, or within reach of victory, rather. And this is due, thanks in no small part, to the spineless and feckless efforts of what used to be the Grand Old Party, what is now the gutless Opposition Party, or GOP, particularly under the tutelage of people like John Boehner, and then Benedict Arnold, Paul Ryan, and Mitch the Turtle McConnell. Why? They just don't want to do anything. They don't want to stand up. They're afraid to be labeled as racist. But, you see, that's part of the dichotomy and the danger that's presented by this new alternative, or alt-right, that has arisen in this power vacuum. It's because they want to use identity politics instead of pointing to the truth. They want to weaken what we were founded upon because deep down they feel that it has no place in an open and honest society. So, in a sense, they are pushing for the same kind of divisiveness that is embraced by the socialist founders of the Labor Day holiday, of those who want to claim that class warfare and class is the basis of every society and civilization, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. So, again, the only way to proactively combat this, the only way to get us back onto the path to prosperity, both as a nation and as a people, is to go back to basics, and basics, as we have so oft times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, is found in the Constitution. The Constitution itself is the key. It is that key that has been with us since the inception of our nation some 235 plus years ago. It really is that simple, folks. It really is that cut and dry and black and white. And that is why we must foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared Constitution to fully embrace our fundamental and inalienable rights, which were endowed to us by our Creator, the God of nature himself. And in so doing, we move to liberate ourselves from these penultimate concerns, from these nonsensical avenues of bovine and equine excrement that have been foisted upon us against our will by these diabolical, frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists, because deep down they want to ultimately transform us and to change us and to deprive us and to strip us of all that we hold near and dear in this beloved nation of ours. But we must reject that, and we reject it by moving forth with the truth, spreading knowledge of the truth, informing ourselves, and delving deeper into what matters. So, on this Labor Day, take this opportunity to once again deny socialism and embrace your individual creative spirit. Embrace the ingenuity that God has endowed unto you, and embrace who you are in your capacity as the true ultimate wielder of sovereignty of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. Because when you do that, that is the first step towards making us be that thriving and flourishing representative republic once again. Because we, and only we, are endowed with the authority, the wherewithal, and the capacity to place this nation back onto the path of prosperity. It is in that light that we achieve so much more than what we have ever. And it is that light that propelled us to such lofty heights in our relatively brief yet illustrious history on God's green earth. And isn't that an amazing message of empowerment? Remember, folks, we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, are all about empowering you. We do these shows for you. We produce these shows to empower you. And with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I would send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol, but she's out with a union saying that collectivist mentality and Labor Day are meant to go together. Therefore, you'll find a complimentary bottle of alcohol in your seat back pocket. As always, folks, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. I invite you to leave any questions, comments, or concerns you may have either here on our YouTube page or on our Google Plus page or our Facebook page. And on top of that, I invite you to follow us at Twitter with the Twitter handle at Radio Aviation EX. One more time, folks, that's at Radio Aviation EX. And there you will find the departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, our Blogspot account, where we are placing audio-only copies of our state-of-the-art radio program so that you can download them and listen to them at your leisure, and the Cafe Press account. The Cafe Press account will allow you to celebrate holidays like today in true spirit, showing individual ingenuity and rugged individualism by having shot glasses, drinking glasses, clothing, apparel, tote bags, laptop protectors, phone protectors, emblazoned with either our original logo or our first class passenger logo. Go ahead and take a gander at that, folks. With such a wide array of products at reasonable prices, you're bound to find something that fits your needs. Once again, folks, thank you for flying the Wright Flyer. We'll see you again next time. Do take care.